Alrighty, folks, welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Wednesday, March 27th, 2024, and this is episode 888 of Living. Yeah, you made episode 888 of Living Free in Tennessee. And today is an interview show. So if you're in the comments and have questions for us today, just put the word question in all caps and then followed by the rest of your questions. I'm pretty excited for this topic. So Keith Phillips from Bunkie Life will be with us, or Heartland Bunkies, I'm seeing in your
HeartlandBunkies.com, which is still Bunkie Life Heartland.
Yes. Well, so
it's just
funny.
That it's a shorter name and that you have to type.
Anyway, so he's here to talk to us about basically integrating your family into your career or the other way around. But we're going to talk about that and some other things about just finding your dream and following your dream and building your life. And what I like about this interview is he totally has a really cool product to sell.
Yeah.
And the whole interview is not about the product to sell. He's like, hey, what do these people want to hear from me?
I'm actually going to talk about this on my nose. That's really bothering now that I can see myself in a screen.
Oh, the red dot.
I like.
Did you get a blackberry bush?
I think I just had a zit yesterday, and I picked it, and then later on I was like, oh gosh, blood! I'm bleeding out.
Yep. So it's going to be a real interview today, guys. Before I jump into that, I wanted to tell you about our featured event of today's show. And it is the Wild Edible Walk that Carrie Brown is doing in Camden, Tennessee on April 8th.
At the Self-Reliance Festival?
Right after the Self-Reliance Festival. Go to selfreliancefestival.com, click on workshops, and get signed up for that. It's a 4-hour class. So it's not just like, hey, here's some plants. He's going to talk to you about how to harvest them, when to harvest them, what to do with them once you harvest them, show you real-life examples of that through a guided workshop in Camden, Tennessee. And the ticket cost is only $75. And, you can get done with that class and then, scoot feet north and go watch the eclipse if that's what you're looking to do. Just depends on what you want. I also want to thank our two sponsors of today's show. Our first sponsor is John Pugliano and the Wealth Studying Podcast. He's been supporting us since day one. And the minute I launched sponsorship, he was all up for it. So he has a podcast that's really awesome. It comes out once or twice a week. And the episodes are like 10, 15 minutes long. And he analyzes finances from a measured homesteader's point of view, which is great because the fear cycle is always there getting us to make bad financial decisions with our investments. And his thought is, let's look at how to make money, not what's going on in the world, although what's going on in the world does impact how you make your investment decisions. So I think it's a pretty cool podcast. Check it out at investablewealth.com. Just go there and click on podcast, and then you can check that out, or use your podcatcher and look for the Wealth Studying, like homesteading podcast. Our second sponsor of today's show is Hollow Roast Coffee. Get fresh, air-roasted coffee delivered directly to your door at hollowroast.com. We wait till you order it to roast it, so sometimes it takes a few days to ship, but it is awesome. And if you are an LFTN member, you have a discount code in your membership portal. With that, I'm going to say, Keith, welcome to the show.
Just ordering some Hollow Roast.
Oh, you're still ordering? How many pounds do you want? I'll see you in a week.
Yeah. Probably need 2 anyway.
A couple of pounds.
I need some at the show. I'm still planning on bringing the espresso machine.
All right, so you're going to serve espresso at the Self-Reliance Festival?
Some lattes.
Lattes are delicious.
Or espresso. We can do whatever.
Straight up shot with some sugar. Isn't that traditional?
Don't Italy? Put sugar in it.
I don't, but other people do.
I guess they're free to do that. It's America. They're free to do stupid things. But you could roast coffee. You could teach your kids to roast coffee, and then you could sell it as part of your homestead, like enterprise.
Yeah, one could do that.
Maybe we can talk about things like that.
That would be a great idea. Well, first of all, tell us who's Keith Phillips and what is Heartland Bunkies, and how did you end up on the LFTN podcast?
I was really drunk one night. No, just kidding. So I'm Keith Phillips. I'm an ex-Army guy. I'm a wannabe homesteader guy. I have 6 kids. My wife, Becky, and I do. And we live on 50 plus or minus acres, and we've got goats and chickens and rabbits and horses. And the horses are just delicious when you cook them rare. Just kidding. We haven't eaten any horses yet. We've thought about it. You know, if what is the acronym? Well, when the feces impacts the rotary oscillator, when the stuff hits the fan, you know, the STHF.
Yeah.
We've got horses to eat.
HTF. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hits
So we've got horses
fan.
to eat. We've got a pond full of fish that we could probably just live off of forever. But also in the meantime, we've got 2 vacation rentals that we run. I'm sitting in one of them right now. Actually, a friend of mine is here, staying in it, because that's mainly what these things. This is Bunkie Life, Heartland. We sell these kits that go together very quickly. You and your friends and family can build it in 2 or 3 days, you know, over a weekend, without breaking the bank and without a contractor. Boom! That was my pitch.
All right. Well done. Well done.
Yeah. And we're roasting coffee. Me and you were talking about like the new coffee roaster I'm getting, to go a little more commercial with that, because we've been selling coffee very small scale.
What have you been roasting? Okay, so let's back up. How many businesses are you running from your homestead right now? Because you got Bunkie Life, and there's coffee. What else?
I can't talk about the other ones.
If he tells us, he'll have to kill us.
I think I'm actually slimmed down to that right now. I did have an aircraft rental business, and I was a pilot in the Army, and so there's a bunch of ex-Army pilots that are going into airlines now. There's a big pilot shortage, paying more money, so they're going and doing that. And I was running planes to those guys, and that was actually really cool, because like my kids would go with me to like shuffle planes around and work on them and change the oil on them and stuff like that all the time. So we've been but we're kind of clear of that now. And really what we're looking to do is be more rooted, be more grounded, not leave so much, kind of be on a permanent staycation. And by staycation, I mean like just be here and working all the time. And we're big fans of Wendell Berry, if anybody knows who that is. And if you read his books, you kind of get the idea that life used to be different all over the world, but particularly his paradigm is the United States. He's looking at Joel Salatin is a huge Wendell Berry fan, by the way. So yeah, you'll see, you know, him kind of mention him here and there. So what we're seeing is that in this modern society, everything is hyper individualized. It was the me generation 50 years ago. And now it's just what would ever be considered different than this odd world in which I am here all the time, you know? And so looking back, what happened to us as a culture? What happened to families? What happened to local economies? What happened to local just groups of friends? What Wendell Berry likes to refer to as the membership, where it's like when you're there, you are a member, whether you want to be or not. And, you know, you will be helped. You will be hurt. You will help others. You will hurt others. And we all understand this, and we're very interconnected at a local level. So that's kind of been where a lot of my thought has been over the last few years. And yeah, maybe we can break that down more.
Yeah. So when I saw your application come in, and I can guarantee you that we're not going to go through question by question, even though you brought some very thoughtful questions, but it helped me kind of understand where you wanted to go. And
I don't remember what I put on that. It was a long time ago, and
that's fine. Yeah, that's the other.
I'm very scared right now.
No,
it's like
fine.
waking up from a bad trip.
No. We're just gonna have a conversation here. What was cool is that, like, being a former military pilot, I am gonna assume that your family life looked a lot like you going off to do things and make money, and your wife kind of holding down the fort at home, right?
Exactly.
And then at some point you got out.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is for the birds. We need to work as a family unit in creating our life, you know, building our living together. Is that correct?
Very much so.
How did that moment happen for you?
So about, when did I get out? 2014? Sometime 2014, 15, I read a book that was recommended by another veteran friend called Tribe by Sebastian Junger, which is a depressing book to read because the guy puts his fingers on a lot of problems, but frankly provides almost no solutions. He was a war correspondent. The first big thing he covered was the siege of Sarajevo. One of the things he saw later on, meeting these people again, like 5-10 years later after he had covered that event, was that they looked back on those nights of huddling around a fire in which they were burning their furniture so as not to freeze and playing cards because there was nothing else to do, or just talking, being together. They looked back on those memories fondly now that things were comfortable again. Why is everybody obsessed with the zombie apocalypse? Why is everybody just really super excited that the electromagnetic pulse comes tomorrow and we can forget modernity and get a reset? Why are we so uncomfortable with our comfort? And one of the things, like with soldiers, they come back and they miss war, right? So why is this? What are we doing that's wrong here? And why cannot peaceful, good times at home be good? Why do we yearn for something else? And me, the ADD kid that I am, I'm always like, ooh, squirrel, So for me, I think it's even more so. And basically what I've come down to is that we don't have the right view of work. There was a book, it was a theological book, in which, so what are people for? Well, people are supposed to be working, supposed to be producing stuff. Well, the entire economy now is based on basically the neo-Keynesian consensus that consumption is what drives everything, and consumption is how you view the economy. We are consumers, and we flip little levers here and here, there in the Fed, and do all these things to screw with the way people consume, and we define ourselves that way, and we just orient everything around it. It's entertainment and consumption driven, and then we're not happy, even though we're really living better than, materially than anybody's ever lived before. So what's going on? And the sort of Christian theologically grounded answer that I've come to, it's not really mine, but I think I'm starting to put it together in a somewhat original, or at least poignant way, is that we're supposed to be working and keeping. Genesis 2, God put man in the garden to work it and keep it. And that's like the base assumption for everything. So you're turning wilderness into garden. And instead, what we've gotten to is, how can I get my work week the shortest, in which I can put as much into the bank as possible, or maybe I'll work a lot to get it in the bank as quickly as possible, to have a retirement, to stop working, so then I can enjoy life. And in the meantime, dad goes over here to work, mom goes over here to work, the kids go over here to work, and here to work, and here to work, which is their various grade levels in education, in which they're siloed into these little things where they only interact with people that are within a year of their age, which is very odd. And then like these grade levels like get their own like corporate personalities going, and everything is pulling them apart. And then when they come back together, what do they come back together for? Do they do anything? Do they make anything? Mostly no. They watch television. And so they consume from this very small group of people that that small group of people is producing, and what they find to be ideologically correct. Millions, billions of people tune into that and receive it as though it is a reality. And it's actually manufactured. It might be based on reality, and it might not even be nefarious, but it is their manufactured production of what they want you to see. And everyone's looking at it. So if you could almost reset and say, well, the color of this wall back here behind me is purple. And everybody goes, oh, that's purple. And if a billion people see it at the same time, all of a sudden it becomes true in their mind, right? So that's happened. And then as we're watching television now, we were all gathered around the same television, watching the same things, getting the same cultural references, and in some ways being entertained together or doing sports together, things like that. Now we're watching TV, and the TV's over here, and I'm doing this. Everybody in the whole family is doing it. My kids don't have smartphones, by the way. I would suggest you don't do that. All the science now says that they're worse than crack cocaine. So it's just hyper individualization. and work, which is really supposed to be man's primary thing. We're supposed to be producers. We're supposed to be creating within creation. Instead, we're becoming consumers. And if you look at the people that really become the worst kind of consumer, they are hyper rich or very poor. And if they get to that point where they are just welfare state leeches, and I don't mean that like a pejorative, I hate these people kind of way. I feel bad. I want people to elevate to something better. And then you get trust fund babies, right? Or people that have maybe made their wealth, but now their whole life is just guarding that wealth. And they're not really producing anymore. They're like, now I can enjoy life. And what happens? They go crazy. And we did it to women in the 20th century when we said, you don't need to work outside the home because that's culturally unacceptable. Yet we've drugged your husband away from your whole family away from the farm. And we've put your husband in a factory or an office somewhere. And you're just going to stay home and keep house. And so eventually she decides that she needs to take Valium to stay sane in between card games and affairs because she's not doing anything. She's not producing. It's a pseudo traditionalism that's just fake, right? And it drives people nuts. So we need to get away from that. Instead of being pulled away by work, let's adopt work, types of work, and paradigms of work that pull families together. Because really the family itself is like an anachronism. And if you look at, various philosophies, particular Marxist, neo-Marxist philosophers, and even way back to, like Plato, he was talking about children sort of being professionally raised. It's kind of where we're at. The family is this obsolete, used to be institution. So no wonder it's failing, but all these sociological problems are happening. We can probably mitigate a lot of that by looking at work differently and using work to draw us together as people, as families.
So now you've taken your family down a road where you're generating your own income, right?
Mm-hmm.
How hard was it to start that? Was it like terrifying? Like, what did that look like?
So we've been making the transition for a long time. And then this year was kind of the big jump. Came a little earlier than I wanted it to. I'll give you the details on that later. But it's possible. And, I could say some really fluffy things like, just trust God or it'll all be okay. But really, if you are, you don't want to jump into it completely unprepared. You want to have some kind of nest egg. But if you are ready to work, if you are ready to produce, there are ample avenues for it. You might need bridges. It would be great to, work your job as long as you can, getting into your entrepreneurial endeavor, not as long as you can. You got to make the break at some point. But I think what we have to understand is that it is natural. We look at it now as like employment, which when you study ancient Rome, because all men think about ancient Rome 5 times a day, minimum. I know I do, probably 15. If you look at slavery in like 1st, 2nd century Rome, it was employment. That's all it was. Slaves rose to pretty high levels in government and had important jobs and stuff. I mean, they were just employees, right? And so, the sort of Tocquevillian ideal of America was where everybody became an aristocrat. They were landowners. Everybody's landed gentry. But now with technology, if we look at it right and we adopt it right and we adopt the right technology, instead of landed gentry needing to have a few hundred people to work their land for them so that they can live kind of above everybody else. I mean, I've got a tractor. That's pretty cool. It does the work of so many people. And so if we actually want to pursue that Tocquevillian early American ideal of a country of aristocrats who are all landowners and doing this independent living, we can do it. It's natural. That's the natural way of things, is to just work and receive a reward and be intimately connected to it. When we separate work from reward, we end up with theft or slavery, right? Depending on which side of it we're on. So what's difficult for us to understand is that some large corporate institution being the mediator between our work and our reward is not normal, or it's not the best normal. Okay. So trust that that's true in the world that God created, that it is orderly and it works this way. If you actually go forth and wish to produce, wish to be a producer, you will naturally be rewarded from it, barring somebody coming in between you, and it's called theft in that case, or taxes.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so for you, the transition looked like you worked a job and started things with your family, and eventually you just had to cut the leash to the job.
Yeah. Yep. And I think most people, a lot of people I've heard talk about this, it's like work your job as long as you can, basically until something's getting, till you can't because you're not going to do a good job at it. That's kind of where I was at. And I had no passion to keep doing it. So it was like, yeah, I need to jump into these things that I do have the passion to keep doing. And now I'm not away from the house without my family for the most part. The things that I do, okay, I do have one more business. I guess it is a business at this point, which is building agricultural fence, as basically a subcontractor to a friend. I'm not getting paid by the hour. I'm getting paid by the foot. So that makes it a real business.
It makes you motivated to build it faster.
It does. And I bring the family. And so the kids are learning those skills. The kids basically take care of all the farm chores. And I just have to check up every now and then to make sure that, go find what they've been slacking on. But yeah, they're learning the skills there. They're learning, you probably didn't see this, but at the Sustainable
KSL?
Living, KSL, my sons, 11 and 9, that were there. I brought the 6-year-old was there too. I brought all the boys. But the 2 older ones, like, they would sell. It was funny. It's like interacting with people and behaving like a business person and thinking that way, being able to present information. That's a huge skill in and of itself. And they're picking that up.
Well, that's what happens when you have them working a booth with you, right? There's like no way around it. They were also running around having some fun.
That happened.
Yeah, it did happen, as kids do. So when you made the leap, like when you were finally like, I got to just quit my job, did you have some spare months in there getting from that to, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, we've got nest eggs, which has been good to have. And that goes back to really by the time we got in the military and all that too, and kind of carrying along and looking to do something else. We had the dream of just like, we're going to go full on, farmers at some point. Frankly, if it's up to me to be the full-time farmer, I guess starvation would teach me how to stop starving. But animals are great because they'll bust down the fence and come tell you eventually that you're neglecting them for the most part. Plants, they just die quietly. That's annoying. I wish they'd say something to me and let me know that I'm screwing it up.
I mean, they do. You just have to learn their language.
Yeah,
They're not as in your face.
Yeah. We wanted to do that, but there was always like, we didn't know why, I think. And I think, not everybody has to be a farmer. And I think there's other people that need to come into this conversation, if you will, who are not going to be farmers, who are not going to be sort of social media driven business owner type people or whatever. But they're going to have other forms of business in which maybe they live in cities, for example. But they still integrate family into work in such a way that is not just painful and laborious. I saw one fellow, his big thing that he got going was a soap manufacturing, basically in his bathtub. Got the family going on in that, and they're doing the farmers markets and different stuff. But I don't think I've found a really great way to integrate family into IT work, if you're going to sit there and do that. But at the same time, that might just be that you're you're doing that, when a lot of those jobs are remote, and the ones that are going to continue to exist after AI gets a lot of them fired will be remote. And that's going to pay the bills while they also farm. So a lot of IT people and engineers and stuff that are great farmers. So there will be part-timers, but I don't know. We're in a very weird situation just in history, in culture, because we're dealing with these problems that nobody's dealt with before. So what is it? Maybe in 100 years or 200 years, people really figure out how to do this well. But right now we're kind of grasping. I know a lot of what we're doing is resynthesizing culture that used to exist and has been destroyed by consumerism. So we might fake it till we make it.
Yeah, I find this time very interesting too, because I've looked a lot at the Industrial Revolution and what that transition was like, because it's similar what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Where technology is going leaps and bounds. We were talking about Chat GPT before we went live today, right? Where like people are manufacturing how to homestead books with Chat GPT, selling those. I'm seeing them sell it online, and I look at them and it is factually incorrect from the reality I have experienced on a homestead. But that doesn't mean you can't use that tool to do something like get you an outline, draft it, and then go through and correct it with real experience, which cuts down the book writing time by quite a bit, right?
Yep.
And there are copyright concerns or whatever, but that's just one small tool that's not even that complex of a tool. And there's much more complexity and acceleration happening. And so then our response as a culture, some of us, is I'm going to go learn how to do everything from scratch by hand, which is the polar opposite of what AI is doing technologically. Like it's so funny because it's like this push pull. But I think a lot of that, there's two motivations there. One is fear. If things break down, I want to feed myself. And that's just a very basic need that we all die without food and water, right? So that's one thing. But then I think there's also, as we see the automation coming into the food system and the health ramifications of what has happened in the last 100 years to the food system, people just want to know that their food is natural. I think
you just have this real connection.
Yeah, there's a yearning more than that with nature and
to have a real fulfilling existence.
Yeah. And so it's kind of like this weird, like hyper modern paired with, I'm going to go primitive in a hyper modern world that's happening right now. And I don't know where that ends. I don't know what happens next.
Well, frankly. In the 1950s, people were very, very optimistic. At least maybe in the early 50s. You had the Jetsons was a parody on what was going on 10, 15 years earlier when everybody was just super, super positive about it. And so George Jetson is like, man, this 3-hour work week is killing me. It's rough, right? Because that was the idea, was that productivity was ramping up so much that each individual person wouldn't have to spend very much time producing, and they could spend the rest of the time goofing off. So that futurism that was there gave way, obviously, to something more pessimistic later. But I think we could be very optimistic at this point and say, look, the amount of productivity that we get now is incredible. There's another book I'll recommend called Superabundance by Marion L. Tupy and Gail Poole, I believe it is. Very academic, thick, heady book. But the idea is that forget currency, just look at how much unskilled labor it takes to produce a pound of sugar or to buy a pound of sugar or a bushel of wheat, whatever your thing is. And it's nothing compared to what it was. I mean, if you actually wanted to buy a prepared meal that somebody else cooked, 300, 400 years ago, you're probably going to work all day as an unskilled labor to get that one meal. Now it's, you work for an hour or less. So we've got the ability, especially if you do build some skills, a little bit of specialization, and then realize you get your specialization, make some money that way so that your hourly rate's pretty good, but then realize that the rest of your life should not be consumed with consumption. It should not be consumed with entertainment. It should be consumed with broadening your ability to produce truth, beauty, and goodness in this world in various ways. There's one guy, I can't remember the quote. He talked about specialization is for insects. A man should be able to plan a battle attack, process deer, write poetry, and now it would be like set up a website. A man should be able to do all these things. A human being, and in doing that and becoming broad, becoming competent at many things. There's a confidence that comes from that. There's a fulfillment that comes from it. I think we're created to do that. And so I think a lot of people that try to do the homestead or particularly the prepper thing, they're going into it partly because it's fun, and that's good. Do it because it's fun. But then some people are really scared. And then they get into it like, well, this is actually a whole lot of work. And they didn't get the philosophical underpinning that actually the work is good. Go enjoy the work.
Fun. Yeah, that's the thing that, I come to the preparedness world the other way. So I come to it from a homesteader's perspective first, because I was motivated by wanting my food to be clean. Because after traveling in Europe and coming back here and feeling terrible the minute I ate any food here, I realized our food was poison. Even the fresh food at the grocery store that I was getting was poison. It was the best I could get, and it wasn't good enough. And so I just started growing. I'm like, well, I guess I got to grow my own stuff, like typical journey. And it wasn't until I was a good 10 years into homesteading that I realized that I was also a prepper.
Yeah.
And
default setting.
Yeah, it was just because when you live in a rural setting, you have to think about things in advance or else it does not go well.
Right.
But homesteading for me was also fun. Like canning food is what I do for fun in the summer. It talks to me creatively. It's a little bit analytical, but not too analytical. You end up with pretty jars. You end up with food stability. Like all of those things is fun. And so to me, it doesn't feel like work, which is also a danger, because when all of your fun homesteading things isn't work, but it is work, you can, from time to time, and I know it's very rare that a homesteader does this, but from time to time, you might overcommit and start too many things at one time.
Can't imagine.
It never happens. Like the first piece of advice you ever hear when people are like, what advice do you have for new homesteaders? And you're like, start one thing at a time, because I didn't, because nobody does.
Yeah. And that's, I'm sure even if you wrote your homesteading book with ChatGPT, it would still tell you to start one thing per year or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard to do.
I try not to add more than one major thing per year, but some years I've done more than one. And I will say, just adding the sheep 2 years ago, that was a 2-year thing for us. It was a lot. It's still a lot. And I'm not ready to add one more thing yet.
Yeah.
But, the first year of homesteading, I added 5 or 6 things the first year.
Yeah, exactly. Because at first it's like, well, this one thing can't possibly be enough.
Yeah.
I clearly need
more
to do than this.
I want a garden. I need more than a garden. I want to put an orchard in. I need more than an orchard. I want ducks.
And I would not do small raised beds. No, I need a big garden.
Yeah.
A really big one that I'll never be able to keep up with the weeding.
Correct. No, I did that in year 2. I did a relatively small garden in year 1. And then I was like, well, if I can grow 20 tomato plants and get all this abundance, I'll do 140 and I'll have that much more. And I had less production in year 2 than I did off of those 20 plants in year 1.
It shocks me how 2 well cared for tomato plants can probably produce all the tomatoes I need in a season. Now, if I want to have excess for other people and do a whole lot of canning, different story. But versus putting 12 or 20 or 40 in a big garden.
Yeah, 20 is my number. Yeah, I now just grow 20 plants. I actually have more than 20 started out there. But
do you actually sell produce to anybody else? No. You're canning a lot and all that.
Yeah. We just eat a lot of tomatoey things.
So there are, well, yeah, you must. There are 4 or 5 cans of jars of chicken stock made from the chickens we butchered the day or two before we were last on air together.
Yeah.
So that happened today. It's pretty cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have roughly 68 jars of bone broth canned, and I'm not allowed to can any more bone broth because we're not using it.
Yeah.
And
It's hard to
so
think that fast.
like I popped one open this week and I'm like 67 jars left to go. And there's just like the bones are accumulating in my freezer and I'm looking at the bones going, come on, man.
So Tactical's sitting there and you sneak up on him with another cup of hot
like,
bone broth. Drink it.
So in the winter, it was working great. I was like, the bones from the week I was making bone broth and just eating it fresh to use them up and not getting, and I was like, we'll just leave the canned goods as canned goods until we need to get into them. And now I'm like, we need to be strategic all summer long to drink hot bone broth because there's just so much of it. So
yeah,
it's a weird problem to have. And the thing is, every stew I make usually has a bone in the meat. And so I don't need broth to make the stew, which is where, like I look at all the recipes and they're like, put 2 cups of bone broth in that. I'm like, okay, bone in piece of meat, done. 2 cups of water, done. Yeah.
I never thought about that.
Yeah. I rarely,
cool.
I think also like when we cut carbs, risotto doesn't happen here anymore. Like stuff like that you'd use bone broth in. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
So what would you say are the easiest businesses for somebody who's like, you know what? I have a job and I want to start building something that actually brings revenue in so that I can see a light at the end of the tunnel. Because I think where the mindset is when people are at a job and they're hearing people like us talk, they're like, yeah, that's great for them, but I've got so many bills and so much pressure. There's no way I could possibly get out of the rat race. And so what would you say to that person?
Obviously, it depends on what your skills are. If you can do something remote to kind of bridge the gap, Starlink's out there now, help you out with it. But what I can say what we've done, right? For us, it's been short-term rentals, Airbnb, but we're not going to say that anymore because we're trying to get rid of that thing that they're the only thing out there. They're not. Short-term rentals, vacation rentals. And for us, we're in a very rural part of the country, but that also has some tourism draw. So not everywhere is going to be quite as good as this, but basically if you live there, there's a reason for somebody else to be there for a while. And, travel nurses, travel physical therapists, travel this and that, they're always looking for places to stay for 6, 8, 10 weeks at a time. And so we built a cabin that's a 16 by 20 with a loft that was stick built, actually no floor plans, no blueprints or anything, but a friend of ours who I bailed out of jail came in and then, if you're going to bail somebody out of jail, make sure they got some skills, like how to build a house.
Yeah.
And he was really good at that. So we worked for about 6 months straight on that. And it took a whole lot of money and a whole lot of time, but still a good investment. Basically, a 30, 40%, well, like a 50% ROI if we don't count any labor. Now, if you had somebody else build it, it would be like a 25, 30% ROI, which is pretty good. That's better than most investments you're going to find out there. And then once we got involved with Bunkie Life, we got a Bunkie, which I'm sitting in right now. And the ROI is substantially better on it. It's a much smaller thing. This was 220 square feet, but it's enough for vacation rental. Particularly our market is heavy with just couples going for the romantic getaway, within 2 or 3 hours of the house. And so it's perfect for them. So we've got a little kitchenette. We've got sleeping upstairs, kind of a sitting area downstairs. And the price is substantially less. Like the kit I'm in right now is a $12,555 kit. And that comes with basically everything from the sill plates, the pressure treated stuff at the bottom, all the way up to the roof decking. So you just have to add a little bit of insulation below the floor and above the ceiling, and then the roofing itself, which is about $500, and then plumb it and wire it, things like that. But all in for an on-grid setup, you're looking at like even if you had somebody else do almost everything, you're looking at no more than $35,000 all in. If you finance some of that, I'm not encouraging a whole lot of debt, but productive debt is very different than, just getting a big television on a credit card. That's a different story. But you don't have to go that big from the get-go. You could do something much smaller, or do one of our smaller kits for, well less than $10,000, leave it off grid, try to do all the work yourself, and be started on something that could very easily bring you in excess of $15,000 a year of income for less than $15,000 startup. Now, you're probably going to have to do a pretty good job marketing it to get that kind of money out of it, if you go that with one that's that small, but it's quite possible. People are paying $150 a night to sleep in a tent these days. So if you come at it from that aspect of like glamping, and you have a homestead, you have some sheep, maybe the sheep will graze by the place. I can wake up to a rooster. They pay money for that. So if you are trying to homestead and you need that financial buffer, especially getting started, it's a very good way to do it. Now, you don't want people near you or whatever. Okay, put it at the other side of the property and don't offer to like hang out with them, But really, we've had almost no horror stories, and really the horror stories aren't that horrible. And it's bringing in a substantial amount of money. It's like 9 months.
I had an Airbnb here for a long time, and the majority of the time, no problems. I've had 2 problems in a 5-year period of time, and they were not big problems. One was somebody who just didn't like the place and left, and then left a terrible review and left it very messy. Like they just disappeared and didn't tell me they were gone.
Wow, that's weird.
And I will say to their like point, they came in and the fridge stopped working. Like my fridge broke.
Yeah.
And so I brought down coolers. I got a fridge there like the next day, which wasn't fast enough for them. Yeah. And I'm like, well, sometimes fridges break. Like, I don't know what to say.
And it's annoying if somebody doesn't even give you the chance to respond.
Yeah.
And help, to fix it, whatever the thing is. And then if you do respond really quick, best you can, and then they still leave a bad review. Yeah. That's annoying. Yeah. But that's kind of, price of doing business.
Yeah.
Do.
Yeah. And it was fine. I mean, whatever. I responded to the bad review. I think I got it taken down ultimately. I was like, listen, this is what I did. Because they have it. And then the other one, they just left a huge mess. They just left a huge mess. And it was not like damaging mess. It was just a huge mess.
But a few hours later, it's done, and you're like annoyed, but you're over it. And
they went through every drawer in every cabinet in the whole place and took everything out, which was, so that's the look on your face. And it was a combination. My mom lived there when she's in town, and we Airbnb'd it when she wasn't there. So they went like through all her personal drawers of underwear or whatnot. And I'm like, well, like I didn't say you couldn't go through the drawers, but like, it's clearly a dresser with somebody's clothes in it. Like, just leave it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The ones, the 2 we have now, there's not going to be anything like that to go through.
Yeah.
I think if somebody just turned everything over, they'd be like, man, we had to work for 3 hours, 2 or 3 hours a day. What a terrible thing. Only got paid $40 an hour to do this. This is awful. The other thing I'll say though, about just sort of your supplementary, or maybe the homestead is kind of your supplementary, and you're doing something else as you ease into the homesteading part. Especially if you're moving to a rural area for the first time, get to know your neighbors, get to know the people around you. Obviously some people are going to be trashy, useless people that you really don't want to associate with that much, but most people are not. And rural areas generally have an aging population, and there are less people out there to do the work that needs to be done. So if you're just available and you let people know it, you will very quickly have all the jobs you want. Pretty soon you're a painter and a carpenter and a mechanic. And you're farm sitting for somebody, like all of this stuff kind of happens organically. If you just know your neighbors And it's I've talked about this when we live streamed that time before, but I have been closer to my neighbors relationally in the country than I've ever been to my neighbors in the suburbs, the city, because you actually do end up having to rely on each other. Total self-sufficiency is really not the point. You want local sufficiency, or at least a great deal of local resiliency. And so once you get to know them, I mean, if you want to do stuff, if you want some work, like you'll find it quick. People need stuff done, and it's an aging population for the most part in the countryside. So there are not enough young people to go around. And I say young people, like that could mean you're 45, 50, 55.
That's a young person in the country.
You can still get up a ladder and do stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. Years ago, I had the 17, 18-year-old last year of high school sort of help here. And it was cool because the people who took the jobs here were interested in actually doing what I wanted them to do. Mm-hmm. But, and I've heard all these horror stories about using sort of the younger generation. I was like, no, I mean, they moved wood chips. They helped put up fencing. They did all these things. I only had one come one time to try to make some money hourly, who then left about halfway through the day because they couldn't hack it and never came back. And never, like, I paid them for their 4 hours of weeding in my garden, and they never came back because they were like, wow, that was too hard. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I had some really great helpers ongoing, and they went on to do good things later. They don't need me anymore. But yeah, it's funny how much you can use help when you're on a homestead or on a farm, because there's always something. Mm-hmm. I like the way Joel Salatin organizes it, where he has a per job price as opposed to an hourly price.
Okay. And he does that with
everything.
With like farmhands and stuff.
So if you work at Polyface and you process chickens, mm-hmm. you get like 25 cents a chicken or something. There's some number. And wow. They figured out how long it takes to process the chicken.
30 seconds.
Yeah. It's
not me.
Right.
10 minutes per chicken.
It's like, what happens is people who don't listen to the training and get better at it mm-hmm. leave. And he's like, it takes the pressure. It takes so not paying hourly for him takes the perspective of the worker that they're being screwed out of the situation. Mm-hmm. And it takes the perspective of the person paying that they're not working hard enough out, mm-hmm. because you've just agreed on a per piece price. And if that person ends up twice as fast as everybody else, you don't care, because that's what you're like. Oh, I ended up with double chicken processing today. Fine. And so they've spent a significant amount of time pricing everything that way at Polyface. And I'm like, wow, I don't know how you got all those prices, but you did. And that's kind of cool. So little known fact, Salatin's farm manager slept in this bunkie a month ago. Sweet.
Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah.
I need to ask him more about this pricing thing, because I've thought about that too. Like, how do you get away from hourly help? It's the worst way to pay anybody for anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, some innovation like that. Obviously, like with our fencing work that we do, it's per foot, plus like so much for braces and stuff like that. And that's sort of easy, but it's the difficulty. When you add money per brace, that kind of takes care of the paying you for the level of difficulty, because obviously the more direction changes and stuff, that's the more work, but then it's more money for it. But it doesn't account for how steep the land was, how much sort of undulation that made it difficult to figure out what the tension should be on the wire before you put it up there and stuff.
Yeah, that's a thing. And so they don't have so they also have salaried employees who are just salaried to do a job. So, but it's something I've just been looking at more, because for Hollow Roast Coffee, I do have somebody help me from time to time, and she lets me pay her hourly. And over the years, she's gotten better and better. And so I've paid her more money, but I'm just like, how do I get her in a per piece situation? Because she's, she'll actually make more money that way, probably. And then,
usually do.
Somebody coming in, won't make as much money until they get good at it.
Mm-hmm. And we've paid the kids to do or to help with like Airbnb resets. I mean, short-term rental resets. And it's been per job. We don't pay them per hour, and that's good.
Right.
But that's it's kind of an easy thing to do, but not every guest is the same, right? So what I've noticed, we're 5 minutes from an interstate. We'll get some overnighters. That's the best.
Yeah.
Somebody just needs a place to stay and make it pet friendly. Allow them to bring pets, charge $20 extra. On average, you just make more money without much less work or without much more work. Because they will stop just because you're pet friendly and you're close to the interstate. And even if you're not close to the interstate, major highway, whatever, there's people that do that, the overnights. So don't be afraid of single nighters. You get the cleaning fee. You get to go reset it and get paid that money, or somebody in your family or your neighbor, whoever it is, get integrated with your family and neighbors. And it's not always easy, but those single nighters are really easy. It's not that they're very long. If somebody's there for a week or 2 weeks, like they tend to like stuff's dirtier.
Yeah.
So like if I'm getting paid $50 to reset it, but somebody's been there for 2 weeks, I kind of got hosed. But if somebody was there only one night and I come in and I'm like, were they even here? You know?
Yeah.
That's nice. But if it's the same person every time, sometimes you get the bear, sometimes the bear gets you.
Yeah.
The reviews are going to reflect on them. The better the reviews are, the more they get work, the more work they get. So they want that to be the case, right? So it comes out in the wash. It's nice.
Yeah. David says the unit rate pricing for farm work is neat. A huge part of my career has been designing unit rate programs similar to that for building some of the largest buildings in the world. It's possible. We just have to decide to do it. That's,
well, that's bidding, right? That's bidding jobs. That's bidding subcontractors bidding for stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a decentralized thing. So like, that's not why all by itself. One of the reasons communism, one of the many reasons that communist countries fail, is because, some central committee is trying to plan everything and make all the decisions. And you go back to Hayek's knowledge problem, Austrian economist, is like a billion people making a billion different decisions at the local level is like way more better. That's why like it's very rare that you're going to beat the sort of indexes of the stock market, because the aggregate's usually not wrong. It's usually right. It's very rare that it's wrong.
Yep.
And so all those different people bidding all those different jobs, there's sometimes they're going to over, sometimes they're going to under, but on the aggregate, it's unbeatable.
Yep. All right. Well, we're getting towards the end of the hour. Tell us how people can interact with you, why Bunkies are awesome, how to get your coffee, all of those different things.
Yeah. We'll talk about coffee later. We're not really up and running yet. We've actually got another bunkie to build. I can look over where it's going to go. It's going to go 200 yards that way. But yeah, heartlandbunkies.com would be the website, which is brand new. So look at it, QC it, tell me when it's messed up in a snarky email or even a nice email. A nice email would be very nice. And you can email me, Keith, and this is weird because I haven't gotten the email set up for this one yet, but Keith@bunkylife.com. So the company, I shouldn't have done. Sorry, it's like we were talking about cultural transitions. I'm having a website transition, a website transitional moment. It's Bunky Life Heartland on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. And it's Bunky Life Heartland is the company, and heartlandbunkies.com is the website. And you can email me, Keith@bunkylife.com right now.
Sweet.
And
if you want to see a bunkie in action at Self-Reliance Festival, which is in a week and a half, Keith will be there. He's going to put one together, or half of one together. It won't have the whole roof and everything, a third of one, but you can just see how they basically Lincoln logs out a housing situation that goes together pretty quickly. It's pretty cool. I got to see it last weekend, and he'll be there on Vendor Row. You can check it out. You can see the demos, and just stop by and talk to him about how this transition has gone. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Make it a great week, everyone.